I want to thank everyone for showing up for this ChildNEXUS live session. I am so thrilled to have with us today Michelle Porjes. She's a native Los Angelino, so we are thrilled to have someone locally. Michelle is a licensed educational psychologist and a credentialed school psychologist in the state of California. She's also a member of the Association of Educational Therapists. She has worked in the private school world for over 23 years, where she specialized in consulting, case management, supervision, leadership, and program development. This year, she transitioned to being an executive functioning coach and educational consultant in private practice. I am so thrilled to have you here today to talk about executive functioning, which is such an important topic. It impacts so many aspects of the work that our students do. And I'd love for you to begin the discussion. I know a lot of parents often wonder, what is that? It's such an overarching term that impacts so many different areas. And when we talk about executive functioning, we're talking about a number of different areas. So wherever you would like to start, let's go.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I truly feel honored to be a part of this group and to be able to do this. What I am going to do, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping here. And hopefully everybody can see my hand, and in 1 second it should be in. Share with you my version of executive functioning, how I've been doing things. There's no right or wrong, and it's a hot term right now. It's a hot topic, right? We know that we have things come in that are hot topics, and this is a hot topic right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some notes and some information. And you are going to be able to get later on a copy of the highlights of my lecture. We'll make sure that hopefully I'll show you, I'll do some, I have props, show some props and everything else. So what I usually like to do is start out with a working definition. So this thing where I have my hand is a DocuCam. And the reason I point this out is it's a great way for somebody to work who's doing virtual work, specifically virtual executive functioning or training. You know, I can read with the kid, I can zoom right in on the book, on the words, underline, highlight. So it's enough and have accompanying focusing issues. So whenever you can get in a whole lot closer, that is often really welcome. So we're going to start out with sort of a working definition. And again, this is kind of, I think it's good to have a working definition so we can kind of talk about it. I know that Karen mentioned parents often want to know what this is. So I'm kind of putting this up here. I am going to read out loud. Not that everybody can't read, but when you read something aloud and hear it, we'll have in mind that is our working definition. So executive functioning is a name given to a group of complex mental processes and cognitive abilities. That's the first part where I often pause with parents that you know very well, that it's not just tips, or it is tips are important, but it's not just, oh, these are cute ideas or what a nice thing. It is actually based on cognitive processing and mental processing. It doesn't mean that the child has major issues, but it does start in the brain, right? It is a way that we organize and function and we think about things. These are the skills that allow individuals to manage thoughts, actions, and emotions in order to accomplish tasks. And the reason I have this in here is that all three are important. There's a thought, okay, where are you? I talk a lot with kids about the word momentum and how does that play out? And the actions, meaning you got to do stuff. There's a saying in a book I read in Executive Functioning, which means no spoken to me. Most of the time when you ask a young person or even an adult, what's the right thing to know? They know what the right thing is to know. I should write things down. I should study earlier. I should take notes. We just follow through in our words. It's very important. And emotions. I do believe there's an emotional parts to executive functioning. That's important to address if we're working with kids. I will tell you that a lot of the kids that I work with are anxious. I tend to have a practice with a lot of boys, a lot of preteen and teen boys, very energetic, kids who are into acting, kids who are into sports. I love them to death, and they're anxious. And the anxiety might be, what's that breathing technique again? So well, what's going on? And he was anxious about everything that happened over the weekend. But I was thrilled that he reached out for a breathing technique, whether the parents encouraged him or he reached out. So there is an emotional part of this in terms of the self-regulation and dealing with the feeling overwhelmed, frustration. Because we know often if we go by the idea that kids and people want to do the right thing, but when you feel overwhelmed, it just breaks down. That's important to address the emotional component. Executive functioning skills include planning activities, managing time, and organizing materials. So those are the three sort of basic areas of executive functioning. Like, how are you planning? How are you thinking about breaking down organization materials? I'm definitely going to get into all this. But they also include functions as this. The reason, again, I'm spending time on this is not only for us to have a commonality, but often when we're explaining to parents, we're explaining more than just why can't he get his work done? Or I'll hear from parents, I bought them everything they needed, but they didn't use it. They didn't set their notebook up. Well, often they can't, or they need somebody with them, or they need the encouragement. Really understand that this is not just kids not wanting to. They often don't know how to, or what's important, they can't maintain it. And that's the part where I come in. So I tell people, I've given this lecture before, this workshop before, and I tell people there's a reason why I share all my information. First of all, and there is nothing new. All I did was gather information and put it together in a reasonable way and share it with everybody. But it's really the follow through I have, but it's the way that I follow through and the way that I ask the family really makes the difference. So it's things like, how do we remember details? Definitely memory gets impacted, whether there's real memory issues or when you feel overwhelmed, it's hard to remember. Paying attention, that could be actual paying attention in terms of attentional difficulties, or it could be, as I was working with a student, how do you sift from what's important to non-important, or as we will call psychologists, essential versus non-essential information. How do you switch your focus? That is tough for kids, right? How do we go from, okay, I'm deep diving into this reading, I'm really understanding it, I'm really trying to comprehend, I'm grappling with it, and now I got to summarize all my notes. That's switching of focus from the reading and the comprehending to writing, and that's often really difficult. And the study skills is actually a sub part of executive functioning, and that is like the time management, the organization, and some of the tools we're going to do. This also becomes very important because I do call myself a coach. I am a psychologist, and I want to go into that. All of us are a thing. All of us are a type, right? So there are intuitive types, your school counselors that just sit and listen and help you hold feelings, and they envelop you and hold you. And then there are teachers that are very skill oriented. Well, I'm the coach type. I'm a background of sports and athletics. I'm like, let's go. Come on, move it on. What's our next step? Ready, set, and go. That's my personality. So I use that personality to inform how I work with kids. Again, it maybe doesn't work with everybody, Karen's smiling. It doesn't work with everybody, but it works for me. And it works for a lot of these kids, particularly the boys that are used to coaching and like coaching, because who are their favorite people? Their coach Brian, who does soccer, their coach Melody, who does gymnastics, their sensei in the karate. So it often works for other people, it definitely works for me. Field instruction, okay, when in doubt, teach. We have to go back to the basics of teaching and breaking down what don't we know. You know, we'll say to kids, why don't you take notes? Well, if the kid had any chutzpah at all, they'd say, I don't even know what I'm supposed to take down. So we teach how to take notes. Interventions, how do we intervene? How do we kind of write the course, right? How do we write the course? How do we say, you kind of got it, but let's do it this way? So what I say to kids is tweak. Great idea. I'll say to parents, you are right there. Let's just tweak this a little bit. Psychologically, there's something very important about that word. What is it? It means you're not wrong. We're just going to change what you're doing slightly. There's going to be much more of an openness. So if I say to parents, all wrong, we got to start over. The kid, nope, we're going to do it my way. I'm never going to get buy-in. Buy-in is number one, right? You've got to like me. You've got to buy in. You got to buy in from my approach. So if I can go into, I want to tweak things. I like your idea. It's great. Let's just do this piece. More often than not, I'm going to get, oh, okay. She respects me. She gets where I'm coming from. Okay. And then the second part is strategy. So when you think about intervention and strategies, you're thinking about modifications versus accommodations. That's what all fits in very nicely. Where do I modify and where do I accommodate? So there's a lot of things I call tools, and many people call them tools, and really how I present my tools, you will see them later on, is on a piece of paper. It is two-dimensional, but then we talk about how to intervene it. All right. So again, what areas? Task initiation and completion. For some kids, they just can't get started. And once you get them started, they roll. For other kids, they can get started, but then they lose focus, or they hit a point and they just stop and hope it will disappear. And some kids, quite frankly, have both. Task initiation, completion. And then we talk about how do you study for tests. This is not something that's always taught. There are some schools that do this, but studying for tests is different than test anxiety. If you want to address test anxiety, you address this, in my opinion. Sorry. The realities of working at home. So you address test anxiety and you address test preparation. And test preparation is more than I know what's on the test. It's how did you really prepare for this? Mm-hmm. And then schedule planning. That's a lot of the time management. Now, I'll tell you right now, more often than not, I know the kids have portals. I like portals. I'm on portals, but I take them off the portal in some form or another. Either into, and I will kind of put it here, I'm just to make sure I don't show any names, either into a planner, or I take them onto what I call a command center, which is a whiteboard and a calendar that's put, I don't know if you can see, that's put up on the wall. And I call it a command center because command center is where the action starts. And again, often kids, particularly boys, buy into that term rather than you need to use your calendar. No, we're going to use our command center. Our command center is going to keep our daily list. We're going to keep our mottos for the month because maybe we have a motto for the month. We're going to keep our reminders, and we're going to keep our calendar. Again, so how do I go in there, and why does somebody hire me to do that? Because I go in there every month and I say, let's change your calendar for the month. I do it virtually as well. And I have the kid turn the camera so I can see. I'll say, let's look at our goals. Maybe we've got to have a saying this month. Maybe the saying month is follow through, or start when something is given. So we go ahead and do that. And then keeping track of materials, that's a tough one, you know, kind of knowing where your stuff is. So in times where, I don't know, we're not quarantined, I will go into kids' rooms and we'll go and we'll organize the study space. We'll go and we'll clean out the drawers. We'll make sure we have the right tools. There's tools of trade. Post-its, one of my favorite things. This is a tool of my trade we're going to talk about. Binder clips. I love a good binder clip. You know, that becomes important, you know, in terms of ease. So we have binder clips. The other one, believe it or not, when they're in school, I bring these along because kids do kind of rip papers, and this is not something a family typically has anymore. And we'll talk about some other along the way. So what's the goal? The goal of executive functioning coaching is to help the individual be successful in the classroom and beyond. I'm starting to get calls from people in their 20s, from kids transitioning to college, from kids in college not being successful. So it's not just about middle school and high school. The truth is, if you can set some of this up, it will hold once there's buy-in. But here's the other key: to learn to advocate for his or her needs. So we spend time talking about how do we advocate and how do we advocate appropriately. Even for like how to write an email, you know, sometimes one of them wrote, it was really cute, and you know, the pandemic had started, and one of them started, right, dear so-and-so, I hope the pandemic is going well for you. And I said, okay, well, let's pause. Let's rewrite that a little bit. I thought it was adorable, but you know, you got the idea. All right, so now hopefully from this, we have an idea of a working definition so we can go into stuff a little bit more. All right, I want to talk about some more tools of the trade that I like families to have. I become clearer and clearer this year about what I want. I want sort of a wall planner, a monthly planner. I like it to be magnetic. I like it to be able to have markers in there. Kids like to write with stuff like these markers and all that. It's really important. Folders, and often they need those hanging folders. So they don't need to get a new desk, but sometimes just a little box where they can have hanging folders, because in a real school, we do talk about the difference. I talk with the kids the difference about what's in the notebook versus what goes in the folder, what goes in your filing system, right? If you're done with a unit or semester, it doesn't need to stay in your notebook, but it goes in the filing system. And at the end of the year, then you can decide you keep it or throw it away or whatever. That becomes other people's choices. But I had a kid say, it was adorable, and I said, well, let's file. And he pulled up the trash can right away. And I said, Yeah, okay, we're not going to file that way. We're actually going to file into folders, and later on we'll talk about how the trash can gets worked. Highlighters, Post-its. One of the things, just so you should know, I really like kids to buy the extra sticky Post-its. There's nothing worse than using Post-its and have them fall off, right? Here you've done all the work. And actually computers, you can't see the computer, but I'll show you with my hand. I will often have them use as reminders for particularly some of the kids who fight me. I'll say, great, put your daily task list right here. Put on your computer. Now, if it's an extra sticky, which I think these ones are, or maybe they might not be, if it's extra sticky, they have it right there. Because when they're going to claim, I don't look at the planner, I don't look at my board. Okay, great, we're going to do here. Again, so we tweak our systems to sort of move. A couple of other things I wanted to introduce to you people, if you haven't seen. So I'm going to put this right here. I'm going to pull this down. So this is a pen. Now, I found out about these many years ago when I actually broke my wrist. They're called Dr. Grip. Now, there's a couple of things I like about them. They're not cheap. Okay, so parents, they're about $10, between $6 and $10, sometimes get a little cheaper. But the nice thing about a Dr. Grip is that they have this grippy part here, you see? So it's actually made for people with arthritis, but think about how many kids you have with fine motor issues, right? It's a great pen, it's thick, often their writing is better, their grip is better. So I often recommend these for home for some of the kids. And the kids report this one they like a lot because you can have pens or pencils. So I'll find the pencil one here. There it is. See, it's got a pencil tip here. I'll let it focus. So that's often a great tool that I recommend to people to sort of have. So it's most of the stuff is the basic kind of things. I do like kids, like I said, to have a planner. If I catch them in the middle of the year and they're not using a planner, and might not go to a planner, but I definitely will go to a wall board. On my website, I don't know if you can see it, but you can see it on my Facebook post in terms of the board that I like. So let's talk a little bit more about let's get into what we're doing. So the skills. So I break down the skills into a number of pieces. And I just want to highlight for you in terms of how I do this. Now, again, I do one-on-one sessions. Most kids, unless there's a remedial component, meaning I'm working on writing or reading fluency or reading comprehension, it's once a week. And it's here's what you need to do and here's what's going on. So we have the academic kinds of things like, I always go into reading comprehension. I check that out. Parents will swear to me, oh, the reading is just fine, or they'll tell me they can't comprehend. So I always go over these kinds of things to make sure the kids have these, and I break them down and I name them. And I think naming things and breaking down becomes very important. Almost everything I do, I name it. And I name it fun names sometimes not. I go over a lot of annotating. Annotating is very hot right now in schools. I think it's probably part of state mandates and everything else. I like kids, I don't mind that they annotate in the corner, but I often ask them to annotate on a Post-it and put the Post-it in. I feel like that's important. I like them to write little mini summaries. I don't mind if they use a book and they write in a book. I think that that's fine. But I have rules with annotating. I'll give you an example. My rules with annotating is something has to be underlined and something has to be written. So you can't just underline. You have to underline and you have to write something in your own words. I feel like that's annotating. I will often say to kids, again, you got to be specific. I need an annotation on every page, at least one. So that's what I say. That's what has to happen. We talk a lot about note-taking. There's a lot of good note-taking systems. I am not married to one, but I do like them to have the skills. Can you give me main ideas, supporting details? Can you paraphrase and summarize? And we talk about what that is. And often I will draw it out with them. So I will do something like this. I'll say, here's your information. And here are your notes. So what you're doing is you're sifting through. And if you're going to write a report, here's how you're going to write your report. So I'll give it a visual. Sometimes a visual is very helpful to do that. And then I go over things like outlines, and I often touch on plagiarism. And I think it's important, particularly with so much computer work out here. As simple as you can't take words, and even more that you can't take somebody's words and change the font and stick it in your paragraph. That's still plagiarism. So let's talk about how we can use stuff and make it not plagiarism. Again, I don't think everything has to be creative and new, but I think we have to point it out for kids, because I think some of the kids who get accused of plagiarism really don't think that they are. We have to point that out. So we've got our skill section. Sorry about the dogs. Then we got our organizational system. So we talk about a filing system, both daily and long-term. Where do we file papers daily? Is it in a homework file? Is it in a homework notebook? Is it in the front of the notebook? And then where do we put things long-term so that kids begin to understand that any sort of learning and doing is a system where you break down daily and long-term. So there are multiple steps to things. That becomes important. We talk a lot about task lists. I'm going to show you an example of a task list. Like, how do we make a list so that we know what needs to be done? I'll show you an example a little later on. You know, planning for long-term assignments. You know, again, there's an organization as well as a time management part that becomes very important. And then how do we plan for multiple assignments? So many times we know that it's not just a book report. It's not just a research report. There's a book report, there's a math test, there's a research report, and a vocabulary test, and they're all overlapping in 10 days. So how do we do that? And we can be as much as how much time do you give per day versus what days are you going to do it? I kind of go with the kid and their system on that. And then we talk about things like emailing teachers. You know, often kids don't email teachers. Or worse, they email the teacher and they don't check for a response. So we talk about sort of how to do that and when to do that.
Michelle?
Time management we've talked about. Yeah.
I just wanted to just pause there for a second, because I think there are a few things that you said that are really important. I just don't want to rush past them, particularly when you talk about the summarizing and paraphrasing, because I think we think about that in terms of older kids, but those skills develop really early on when younger kids are reading books. And I think one of the great things, and you may have done this as well with younger kids, is when they're reading a story, for them to retell the story for you, because that's a way to start to develop paraphrasing and summarizing skills, is that they do orally before they're even able to write, you know, an extensive body of text.
I'm on a live. Go take care of it.
I think that's important. I think that those skills can start developing early on for parents who have younger kids. And then you can see how it continues as kids get older, that they can build on those skills that you start to develop early on. And the other thing I really like
really important
is in terms of the academics with the note taking, and really to conceptualize the writing process as an executive functioning task. And I often see that, you know, when I do the assessment part, and then I send them to people like you, because the kids who I see struggling, again, struggle with getting started, even when they're really young, all the way through high school, which is your point about task initiation. But then once they do get started, they sometimes struggle with, they've got all these great ideas in their head. They know what they want to write about. It may be an opinion piece, but they don't know where to start. They don't know how to organize it. They don't know which words to use. They don't know what order to put the words in. And oftentimes that can be overwhelming. And so I love talking about organizing and planning and having a framework where they can put all of these ideas and then begin to start and then work through and then complete the writing task. So it's almost, when we think about writing, we think about the academic skill itself, writing, but you're demonstrating is really the ability of executive functioning to impact that academic skill. And then you address it from an executive functioning perspective rather than just the written content.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that is a really important piece, that, you know, the writing piece for kids, it feels overwhelming, you know, and sometimes it's a matter of breaking it down, but other times it's the matter of saying, you totally can do this. You can really do this. Let's just write some ideas down. Let's just complete this piece or something like that. That becomes very, very helpful. I agree 100%. Yeah, it is an executive function. You know, often when you think about executive function, you think, well, it's just a matter of organizing things or breaking things down or doing that. And it's not, because if you don't get at the skill piece, then it's very hard to do the other stuff. You can look, there are kids that just need some of the organization, they can do the writing, but the majority of the kids that I've seen this year have things that are broken down that need more help. 100%.
Yeah.
Let's move a little bit further.
Yes.
Let's see what we get. Karen, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, but let's move a little bit further.
Okay.
Okay. So I wanna jump a little bit further into a little bit of time management, which again, everything goes with everything else. I have not had one student where it's just been one thing or another. It's been multiple kinds of things. So being able to use a planner, being able to use a calendar system, which are actually two different skills. One is how do I write down what I need to be done and when it does, but some of it is how do you look at time big? And I want to pause and I want to talk about that. One of the things I've found with the online planners and the online portals is that kids can't track time the same way. And they can't look at time the same way. So often taking things out and breaking them down and putting it up visually so that kids can track time differently is so helpful. And it's something we expect, but they can't do. And that's where I don't fault the schools for doing portals. I think they're great. But that's where you'll hear like, I don't need a planner. It's all in my portal. Or actually my portal, I'll hear like, but look, here's a calendar thing. And my response is like, that's fantastic. Do you use it? No. So, okay, let's find another way to sort of do this. And often, again, why I break it down is that we use the planner, not just to have you rewrite what's there, but we use the planner to make sure that we can break down and say, Tuesday, you're going to work on the summary. And Wednesday, you're going to work on your vocabulary testing. And Thursday, you're going to do whatever it is that's next. That becomes really an important thing to do. So it is important to take them off the portal, at least for a while. Later on, and you can almost tell as the person, once you feel like the kids have it, you can tell, and you can tell because they move to their own system. So they'll move to their system where maybe they're not writing down everything, but they have all the notes about what they need to do. So I have a student that actually started to make his own, almost like a flow chart, really bright kid. And I was like, okay, he's moving to his own system. And then, they don't need to write everything down. A couple other things I teach them. This handle it once technique is really important. It's, I don't know where it came from, but a lot of it's for adults. It's things like bills, right? So you take the bill and you put the bill aside, and then you look at the bill, and then you organize the bills, and then once a month you pay the bills. You've handled the bills 3 times, right? So the handle it once tech means just do it, okay? So if you get home and it's like, yeah, I need to clean out my backpack. Okay, well, I'm going to clean it out tomorrow. Okay. But tomorrow comes. So it's like, just make the commitment and do it. So if it's just a quick homework, just do it. Handle it once. You know what? Don't say you're going to file it. Take the papers, put them in the file, and put them in your filing cabinet, and just do it. Handle it once and just do it. Then what's really important to teach kids is the concept of borrowing time. Hugely important. And this is something I teach with kids, particularly that have the heavy extracurricular activities. The drama club, the sports team, like how do we borrow time? Because you are going to have days, or you're going to have a time, when they go into play practice, man, those couple of weeks before, I think they call them tech weeks, those are busy, right? So we teach them how to borrow time, but to borrow time, you need to understand time. In order to understand time, you need to look at time and you need to see how time plays out. So that becomes really an important thing in terms of teaching them. And we'll go over what it means. Because again, there's a difference between a definition, which is important to give kids definition. Remember, I like to teach kids terms. Learn the term, borrow time. But how does it work for you? How does it work for you? How do we break it down for you? So that becomes really important there. All right, let's move a little bit further into test taking. That's a huge area, right? And people will say, test anxiety, or worried about the test, or I draw a blank. I really feel that a lot of times that this happens is because they haven't studied properly. And they just haven't. They might get a study guide from teachers, but they haven't done anything with it. Well, I looked over the study guide. Well, I looked over my homework, but they haven't done it. So we actually make study packets. And here's another thing I do with kids at the beginning. Then eventually when they got it, I know to pull back. I say, you need to print everything. We don't study from screens. Quizlet is a great tool. It's one tool, but it isn't the tool. Okay, so the fact that they're clicking the space bar on Quizlet doesn't mean they're studying. So I have them print out everything. So we're going to print out everything, and then you're going to create a test packet, and they can hold it in their hand. And I can say everything you have, and we use our binder clip. We love our binder clip. So everything we have with the test packet, that's what you study. So what have I done? I've concretized for kids. Here's what you need to study. Then it feels so doable. Then it feels so doable. Oh, I can do that. Of course you can do that. Because often these kids are bright enough to do it. They're just going about it the wrong way. So the minute I have a test packet, I'm really going to prep. And we talk about things like, are you talking out loud? Are you using flashcards? What does it mean to be active? But we can't do any of this till we have the packet. And that's a piece that I haven't seen as much, that I've really been doing with people. And look, I had one kid say, my parents won't let me print. And the kid wasn't right and he wasn't wrong. But the parent said is you can't use up all the colored ink to print everything. But you can use the ink. You can just print. Just don't print in color. So I said, well, we have to understand what mom and dad said. Later on, that's fine. Sorry for my dogs. I apologize again. Later on, that's fine. But to be able to print everything and have it is good. At some point, yes, they can study from a screen. Why? Their confidence matches their knowledge. Right? So often their confidence is there, but their knowledge and skill base is here and it collapses. And that's where you get a kid going, why bother? I worked so hard and it didn't happen. You don't want to say to the kid you didn't work hard. You can. It's not going to really work. But you want to say to the kid there's another way. Or let's take what you did and let's bring it to the other way. Okay. Let's talk about the emotional and behavioral part.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Before we move on to the emotional and behavioral, we actually had a question, which I think is really important. And this seems like a great place to stop to ask the question. One of the attendees said, my question is in regards to summer. Since we're approaching no school days and how to apply these skills during a time there are no assignments, tests, lectures, etc. How can I help my child sharpen skills when she's out of school for summer?
That's a brilliant question. And here would be my answer to that. A brilliant question. I think in this year more than ever, we can do it. And I'll tell you why. We can create, not just giving them the information. I mean, some of it you can give words and terms and all that, but that's not enough. We can simulate it, okay? So we can simulate, one of the things that all kids should be doing, in my opinion, is reading. And they should be reading some sort of book, right? So we can simulate a lot of things. When are we going to read? Okay, how are we going to make sure we understand? How can we write a summary? When are we going to write the summary? What are we going to do with all the summaries at the end? So we can simulate a lot of these kinds of things. If you were, and this is where you can get creative, if we were to have a test, what kind of question would you think would be a good question to come up with? We can flip it and have the kid be the teacher. So we can do a lot through that. The other thing that I do believe should happen every summer, irregardless of everything we've been going through this summer, is the idea of maintaining skills. So I do believe kids should be doing some writing and some math. I'm sorry, I do. I raised my kids that way. It doesn't mean they don't have a summer. It doesn't mean that they don't go to the beach or they don't eat pizza or they don't swim. They do. But it's really important for every kid, whether they're top of the class or not, or have a learning disability or not, to maintain those skills. So again, let's set up a schedule. Let's make a calendar, right? When are we going to do our study times? What are we going to do? What tools do we need to bring to our study times? So we can create, let's have a filing system, right? We're going to call it summer. We're going to call it summer math. We're going to practice putting these kinds of things in here. We're going to have a place on your desk where you're going to have a stack and it's going to be summer material. So I would sort of simulate it in terms of doing that. The other thing that you can simulate with this, and I am also a big proponent of, we often make this about school, right? Which is one of the reasons I think kids should read, because reading isn't just about school, but it's about following through with tasks, right? It's about, when's the time going to be for cleaning up the room? What is everybody's task going to be around the house, right? I think one of the things that we're finding now positive that's coming out of being quarantined is that everybody has a project, right? You know, who's helping to sweep and who's helping to make sure the appliances all the electronics are plugged in, or who's going to empty the trash can, or we're having dinner together. Who's going to help make dinner? Who's going to help bake? What are we going to bake with? What are our components? All of that stuff becomes very, very important to do. So great question.
Great. Baking is a really great executive functioning task.
Baking, cooking, I mean, a lot of things are, because again, it's the thoroughness, right? So clean the room is different than saying to a kid, here's a checklist of 5 things you need to do. And after you do each one of these things, make a check in the checks box. So one of the things I want to tell you that I don't like when families write, like, you have to do a math sheet. I don't have nice writing. And they go, okay, done. That's not how I want it done. You need to do a math sheet. What math sheet you need to do? You need to do page 35, 1 to 5. Okay, so I've been detailed, right? So then often what I'll say to people is make a box. And when it's done, you check it off. So what ends up happening is you've got several kinds of things. If you erase it, you've erased it physically. Symbolically, you've erased it too. It's gone from memory. You see? But if I do this, I can visually see, oh, all I have left is spelling. Good for me. You see? You got a nice visual of what's going on. You've got a nice visual of what's going on. Okay. Becomes a very important thing. So I want to touch a little bit on the emotional and the behavioral. And Karen, be sure to tell me how I'm doing time-wise with some of the stuff.
Okay.
So a couple of things that you want to do. One is plan ahead and anticipating obstacles. This becomes very important for teenagers and for young adults. Because the minute there's an obstacle, look, I had an obstacle today. I had 2 of them, right? I had my kid walk in and go, why are the dogs barking? I don't know. And I'm like, I'm live. I had the other kid walking in and go, why didn't you do anything? I didn't anticipate that obstacle. If I stopped and I walked away and this nap and I couldn't function, that would be a problem, right? It shook. It wasn't what I wanted to happen. It's an obstacle. So I need to plan. I tried to plan ahead for it. It didn't work. But it's good to anticipate obstacles. Dogs bark. Electricity goes out. But there's obstacles for kids. Like, guess what? The computer didn't work. The printer didn't work. I love it when kids say, like, couldn't do the work. The computer didn't work. Really? There was no other way. What were some other choices? So we go into those kinds of things. That becomes a really important thing. That's that flexible thinking. How can you think about things? And kids get stuck. Adults get stuck, right? Well, dogs are barking, can't do anything. It's poor me. And no, find something to do. Figure it out. I don't have any paper. My internet didn't work. And things can happen. You can't always solve the problem in the moment, but you can learn from the problem. So anticipating what might get in the way, what's going to get in the way of you studying? And sometimes, quite frankly, it's motivation, and that's a tough one. Mindset, right? So I do a lot of work with kids on mindset. Let's talk about that. And that's tough. That is tough work. Often parents are wanting this, and I'm having to deal with this, and I'm having to deal with the mindset. The kid will tell me everything. We'll put an electronic calendar. We'll make it come in. We'll make it doable. And then it just didn't happen. And I also get angry, and I also get upset. What do you mean? We took it down. We broke this down. It didn't happen. So I got to get into some of this, the obstacles. We talked a little bit about advocating. So I wanted to kind of jump back into that. This needs to be taught. There's some kids that are not great at advocating, and some that border on being, how shall I say, rude, and believe that they're advocating. So we have to teach everybody how to meet in the middle with something like this, and how to ask a question. So I often will tell kids, if you want to get the teacher angry, do this. I don't understand what happened. I don't know what we did in class today. What do we have to do? I mean, any teacher, we've all been there, right? Go, oh my gosh. But here's how you ask a question. So I say to the student, this is good. You can talk about this to your parent with your kid. Here's what you say. I understand that we talked about when we're doing multiplication, that we write down the problem and we do the first 2 times this one. But what I don't understand is ... That takes practice. But being able to ask a question that shows somebody I'm invested, I'm interested, I'm following along, but I really got lost is good. Now, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental work on the kids, but we talk about things like this. And sometimes I will say to a kid, you need to ask a question a day. For some of those really quiet ones that are lost, you need to ask. You need to practice. That becomes really important, as does this. How do you take responsibility? How do you ask for help? So that's a question. And when you mess up, what do you do? Because often there's a lot of this with kids. It's a teacher. The teacher just needs to figure out whether I turned it in or not. And if they didn't, so be it. And I'll say, well, if you didn't turn it in, why aren't you reaching out? Well, I didn't know I was allowed to. Why didn't you say to the teacher, is there a way that I can make this up? Teacher doesn't read these emails. There's always sort of, not an excuse, because sometimes I think it's genuine, but there's always sort of response that makes it difficult. So we do spend time talking about this, because this is part of self-regulation. It is part of taking the next steps. And this is part of getting over anxiety and moving through those obstacles, because you might bomb a test that you really studied for. So yes, I mean, I'm not saying that everything should be redone, although there's a there's a focus now in education that if kids don't do well, they can redo the test and earn back points, right? I don't necessarily have a big problem with that, because if you want to say, did you master the material or not, I think that that's really an important information to be able to step up. Okay, I want to be sort of mindful of my time, so I'm going to jump around slightly. I'm going to jump around slightly. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the emotional implications and why they're important now. And I think I'm going to dovetail it on the question that was asked. We know about brain states, right? And to be simplistic, I mean, you as professionals and psychologists, you go into and look at different brain states and what's affected. But one of the things we know is if you want to be an optimal learner, you need to be in your frontal brain, your thoughtful brain, your self-regulated brain, right? So that's important. And there are times that we are all there, right? Those are those enlightened times. I got it, the aha moment. This is fun. Oh my God, this is great. And it's great to be there as an educator. There's nothing better than to be in that moment with your student. But we're taxed right now, right? So sometimes with everything that's going on, we're in less than our optimal brain. The children are in less than their optimal brain. They might be in the reactive brain, which is all I need is safety right now, or all I need is a break right now, or they might be in their emotional state, which is I'm overwhelmed, I'm zoomed out, I'm exhausted. I had one kid go, my brain is gonna explode. And I said, I got it. You know, and sometimes we say, let's not do this. And sometimes they'll say, can we push through? I think you can, but can you be with me and push through? Can you be with me? Not just do this. Can you be with me and push through? It becomes important. So it's important to sometimes pause and say, wait a minute, my kid's falling apart or my student is falling apart. I can push through with all the skills I want. But if the kid is so anxious, it doesn't matter what skills. Again, parents or sometimes people want this. I love this. This is fun. But I'm not getting that because I get a kid. So I'll say, okay, let's practice some breathing. Get a little oxygen. Let's stand up. Let's do a brain break. All right. Just as important in executive functioning as all the other skills. I can divide things up and put together lists and all that, but it might be, let's take a break for a second, or it might be what's going on, or it might be, let's walk away and forget about this. Let's go shoot. I've shot many baskets with kids, a little bit younger, or, you know, we've gone and let's take a break. But the break means, and I put this out for kids, it means off attack. You know, break is, because they'll say, I like to unwind and just hang on my phone. That's okay. Not with me there, you won't. But let's take actual physical break. Let's walk around. Let's reset. Let's go outside. So that becomes sort of important. So I wanted to make sure that I got that out. So we're going to go over one more thing, and I'm going to show you a couple of clues, a couple of papers. I think we're on the right thing. Strategies. So remember we talked that we have the accommodations and the modifications, how we get in there, how we teach kids how to redo things, how we scaffold. Then we got some strategies. Obstacles, we talked about that. No triggers, and define them and have a plan. So that's really important. What makes your kids anxious? Does the word test make them anxious? Does the fact that they have to write make them anxious? Does math make them anxious? So what's the plan? I always say to kids, we need a plan. I'm known for always saying that, even with adults, when I meet with adults and meet in teams. Okay, let's have a plan. You know, I mean, that's the way that I handle stress. So it's my lens in which I'm going to work with kids. Let's just come up with a plan. And I like to do it with the family, with the kid, as long as it's reasonable. The plan cannot be, I'm not going to do it. The plan cannot be, I don't respond to threats. I'm only doing 10 minutes and that's it. That's not a plan. That's you threatening me or threatening the teacher. We're not going to do that. We talked about know the strategy and be strategic. So we talk a lot about that. If you know you're supposed to study, let's talk about how to make that happen. Stressful situation, reassess and consider alternative. That's that mental flexibility. Okay, we're in a stressful situation. We still need to learn. What do we need to do to make sure learning's happening? Interrupting automatic responses, that's self-control. So if you're angry or if you're ripping up paper, you know, like when kids get on the iPad and they bang, 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 that screen, you know, that's not helpful. Okay, so we got to take a break now. All right, where are we going to get our self-control? The computer, you're angry at the computer, the glass is not going to respond any better because you're smashing your fingers into it than just touching it. And again, as we talked about a lot of motivational kinds of things. A lot of this, there's an older kid I had, we had set up for some study this, and school it's just not something I need. I said, wait a minute, I'm confused because last week you told me you wanted to go to Penn. So now that's not the same. Well, I want to go to Penn. Well, you know, you tell me you need good grades. These grades aren't going to cut it. So I pushed back. But I pushed back with what the kid said his pursuit was. Is your pursuit changed? No. Well, maybe. Well, okay, let's talk about that. And then we have something called the multiplier effect. You know, again, small goals and how they make a difference. So again, we can't get in there and change everything. So sometimes that's why often, again, in the perfect world, I'll get in there and do a physical change first. Now we got files, now we got a board, now you can see. Versus, oh, wasn't that great how we spent an hour and a half outlining the chapter? That's not as much fun. But sometimes that physical stuff really makes a difference. So what I want to do now is I want to show you a couple of things that I've done to sort of help kids. And again, we'll make sure that this is available to you. So here's one. I'm just going to send it up here. So I like to do something called a daily task list. Now, I will say that one of these things came from, there's a guy who's on the internet, his name is Seth Perler. It will be under useful resources. He's great. You know, I think a lot of his information is great. A lot of the executive functioning people that are out there that are practicing, do a lot of writing, are people that had executive functioning issues themselves, which makes them appealing. Now, does make them appealing, and particularly when they're male, because it does make them appealing. So I like to learn from people like that. So thinking about this, so like this will be something that I often will cut up and I'll put up on the board. Remember I told you this is one of my tools, okay? You know, think about kids, what's your priority? That's a question that people don't think about because your priority may change day to day. Your priority may be, I have my chem test tomorrow, okay? And then we break down, what do I have? Do I have homework? Yes, what is it? Do I have some long-term project? Yes, what is it? I have a quiz. Well, I have the chem quiz, but I also got a vocab quiz next week. Do I have any tests? Nope, no tests this week. Reading, yeah, got a little bit of reading for history. Then there's a check off. Okay, there's an accountability factor. It's always good to put in an accountability factor. Did I finish my homework? Did I update my planner? And then this question, what I'll do is I'll tell kids, look, you know this. They don't always know this, but I tell them. But here's your keys. Always think about what's my priority and is there anything else? Or I'll sometimes say to kids, is there something I'm forgetting? So this is one that I use with older kids. Is there something I'm forgetting? So I have a whole checklist here. Did I check my portal? Did I update my planner? Did I deal with my inbox? We talk about inboxes all the time, and I'll get like, I don't even check email. But if you email the teacher, she responded, how are you going to know? Organizing backpacks. So we set in times for that. Sometimes it's the physical time when I'm there. I'll say, go through emails right now. Get rid of what you don't want. Or let's go through the backpack. But when I ask myself, what am I forgetting? That's a good trigger for my brain to think about, oh, wait, I forgot that I need lunch money for work. I forgot that I need to bring my cleats for soccer tomorrow. So again, systematic thinking and breaking it down becomes really important. And I use this and I have this there. What I ask the kids to do is go through it 30 seconds in the morning, in the evening, and we model, we practice. Okay, priority, go. Homework, go. Long-term, go. Bang, 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 bang. So we go through everything really, really quickly. So this becomes a great tool to sort of go to. Another tool that I go through with students, I'll just show you this tool. And again, I break it down, sometimes depending upon the age of the kid, but I have what are called my, 10, what being a successful student, this goes on their board. So we go through these kind of things. Sometimes it's really Thursday, regular times on the weekends, creating a supply box. We go through homework as a verb. This is my favorite one. We homework. With Coach Michelle, we homework, okay? We prep when we gather everything together. We actually do the homework. And then when we finish the homework, we put it all away in the notebook and the folder in the backpack. Because what happens is the homework happens. Mom sometimes does this, and believe it or not, she does it for middle school kids too. And then the homework is left on the table. And what happens in the school, when we go to school, mom gets in the car, drops it off the front office, drops it off to security, whatever. So we try and say that this is a process. We never close down homework till we do the process. So these are all tools that we use in terms of thinking about what do we have, important assignments, and this and that. Those are my basics. I'd love to entertain a couple more thoughts or questions. Or Karen, if you have some thoughts, so you can be a little free to flowing right now. So Karen, tell me if there's a question that I can maybe entertain from somebody.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. This was so helpful. I'm getting a lot of really good comments. A lot of them were directed right to the panelists about how helpful this information has been. People are
Wonderful.
asking for a replay and asking for the notes, which we will get to everyone who attended and those who logged on but got distracted by something else that happens, especially now. So
We all distracted. I got distracted too. We're all human.
it happens, and it happens to kids too. And I think that someone asked, what does the intake process look like?
For me?
Yeah, I think that's for you.
Okay. Sure. So what I like to do, I mean, you know, I work maybe a little more informally than many people do. The intake process for me is definitely talking with the family and talking with the kid. Now, I will tell you, as the kid gets to be a little bit older, I like the kid to make a commitment that they want to work. So I want to make sure that the kid's on board. They don't have to buy into everything. I don't expect a kid to be excited about one more meeting with an adult, but I like them to be on board. And what I will often do is I will hear from parents very similar things. You know, we lose things. The teachers are reporting that things aren't in time. So I like to set up some goals. But I also like to go through a lot of these kinds of things. Like even if they say, oh, she's so organized, I'll say, great. So we'll go through quickly, but I want to make sure, because chances are they're organized in certain areas and not other areas. I'll give you an example. There are some kids that are physically very well organized, but their approach to reading is not organized. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or there are kids that are actually academically fine, but they live in a mess, and we like to sort of set some goals there. So I do like to touch upon things. I often like to know if there is a report. I do like to read a report or talk with a person who did the assessment, just to gain some information. And then the other thing is just really, you know, I try and form a relationship with the kid, which I can usually do pretty quickly. I like to make sure that our sessions are interactive. I do speak fast. I'm aware that I speak fast, but I find that I don't lose a kid very often. If I were to talk like this, it's not me, and it's not usually as engaging. But I like to leave the kid with, again, that task list. And it takes a while. So it's not something that's, you know, 3 or 4 sessions and we're done. You know, it is something that takes a while. So the intake, just to go back to the intake process, it might be ongoing, meaning I might get 3, 4, 5, 8 times in and want to check in with you. Or I love to have contact with teachers. I've paused that with the online learning because I felt that teachers were so overwhelmed that I've paused that. But I might go ahead and do that. I might go ahead and say to you, I want to do some fill-in, some academics. I actually want to give some kids some work. Now, again, if they're overwhelmed, some of the kids in private school have had 6 hours of Zoom. I'm not going to be crazy about that. But it's not a one-time we're done and then, okay, just fix my kid. It's more, I am looking for parents that are a match with me, and I'm a match with parents as much as kids.
Right. Great. That's helpful. I love that you incorporated the emotional aspect of learning, particularly self-regulation, because so often when people think of executive functioning, they think of the planning, the organization, the time management. They think about, you know, so many aspects of the cognitive functioning that's needed to get a lot of tasks done. But sometimes we miss the emotional component and the self-regulation component. And that's such an important part of executive functioning, right? It's one of the executive functioning areas is emotional and emotional regulation, regulating your emotions. And that can impact your cognitive functioning, right? Particularly in a time when there's so much anxiety and there's a lot of stress. And we know what we know about stress and anxiety is that they can impact your executive functioning system in a significant way, where it makes it harder to think and to plan and focus. If you think about one of the chief complaints of parents right now is that I can't focus because there's so much going on that stress and anxiety impacts your ability to think. And if you can't focus, it's hard to learn. And so we have to, if we can see it in our own lives, can you imagine what it's like for kids who may be stressed about the transition to distance learning? What's going to happen over the summer? Am I going to be going back to school? You know, all the things that are happening in the news and on the media, all of these have an impact. And I think being in tune to those issues are important as well. Sometimes we need to take a pause and a breath. And I love that you say, go and play basketball, step away from the app, right? The platform, the screen, and just connect before we resume learning.
And that's as important, you know, it's interesting because I know that there's the whole economic thing, right, over the last 4 months too, that's a big deal to everybody. And look, it's a big deal to me as well. But if there's ever a time to make sure that your kid has somebody coaching them and somebody that they can connect with one-on-one, again, sometimes it makes more sense for it to be a therapist or a math tutor. I'm not saying it has to be, you know, me or anybody else. It's now, because that one-on-one time often is the mitigating factor to exactly what you said. So we say, let's put this aside and we'll just work on the project, and we're working on it together, which means that I'm blocking out because I'm driving the conversation, right? So I might say, let's break it down. So now the kid has calmed down. Now their nervous system has calmed down. We're accomplishing the task. You know, we're having kind of a good time doing it. Now the kid knows what they need to do when they finish up. So now everything has calmed down and the kid is ready to move forward. Whereas you can give all that on a piece of paper. I'm not saying that teachers don't. And I want you to know, everybody out there, that I am a teacher advocate. I mean, there are times I'm like, what is going on here? But I am a teacher advocate. And it's not that they should or school should, or you're paying for private schools. Like, I totally get that as a parent, as an educator. But sometimes kids need more. And that hour can be, and I don't want to use the word therapeutic, but that hour can also be a balancing hour, which allows the kid's nervous system to calm down. And quite frankly, or 40 minutes or 30 minutes, it allows the parents to calm down. Guess what? She's got this kid and the anxiety. So if there's ever a time to think about this in this world, it is this, because what we're modeling, and again, I'm going to go back to how I opened this, what we're modeling is not just schoolwork. Executive functioning is important in our life. We have to show up on time. We need to complete our work on time. We need to keep our refrigerators stocked. We need to make sure we don't forget the kid in daycare. We need to make sure that we're planning time to physically work out. So it's across the board.
That's great. That's really helpful. And I think it kind of segues into the question that we just received from Monica. And she said, you know, you mentioned in the beginning that many children that you work with exhibit anxiety. What are some ways outside of the academic to alleviate generalized anxiety in order to prepare them to learn? I think that's a great question.
Okay. I have an answer. I have an answer I want to show you, but I need to get something to show you something more. So I'm going to hop off for 10 seconds to get something.
And I'm going to just give a couple of things while we're talking about anxiety. I think 2 things that we can really do to address the anxiety. One is exercise. We know that exercising, particularly getting some exercise outside, it can be jump roping in the backyard, shooting baskets, can increase endorphins in the brain, which allow us to elevate our mood. So Michelle, I'm just giving some tips about exercise, the importance of exercise in terms of alleviating anxiety, and then mindfulness.
Right.
Mindfulness is important as well. Because it allows the brain to calm down, as Michelle was demonstrating and discussing. And you can get apps like Headspace and Calm. They have Headspace and Calm for kids, and it doesn't have to be 30 minutes of mindfulness exercises. It can be 3 minutes. It can be 5 minutes. You can set the timer, and sometimes even before kids jump into an academic task, that can be helpful. But in the summer, it's a great way to start your day, right before you have breakfast, or end the day. So those are 2 things that I would recommend that have been shown research-wise to help with anxiety and to elevate mood. And I'm sure, Michelle, you have, in addition, of course, if it becomes to the point where it's impacting functioning, then you'd want to seek a professional. But Michelle, what are your tips?
100%. So I want to show you, I'll show you 3 for now. So one of the best ways to reduce anxiety and reset the nervous system is by breathing. Now, we all breathe. I know that. But one of the things is thinking about something being like let's call it a 5-5-7 or a 4-4-6. So I want everyone to do this with me, because again, I like us all to do this. So we're going to sit up straight in our seat. best we can. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in through our nose in a minute. We're going to hold it, let's call it for 4 seconds. And we're going to hold it in our belly, okay? So often when we breathe up here, we're sending a message to our body that we're not safe. So we're going to breathe in through our nose. We're going to hold it in our belly for 4, but then we're going to exhale for 6 seconds. So we're going to try that together. Okay, ready? Breathe in through your nose. Hold. Breathe out through the mouth. Now, if you just tune into your body, you might get a little tingly sensation. You definitely feel like everything calmed down. In fact, the dogs just picked up the energy here. So that kind of breathing, I think, is really important. So that was a text I got last night from a kid, like, what was that breathing exercise? It was that one. So I'll show you a couple of other ones. I'm giving you all my tricks of the trade, everybody, so don't forget about me. Pinwheels are great. Because here's the thing about breathing into pinwheels. If you're upset and you're a kid and you're crying, nothing, okay? I like to be silly, by the way, okay? But if you want to say to a kid, we want to make sure you're breathing, take a deep breath in, and the only way I know if you're breathing is if this turns, we go like this. You cannot do that unless you're calm and breathing. Can't do it. Can't do it. Hyperventilating, breathing up there. So when I go, I filled up here, and you can play with kids. Now, the key with these kind of things, the 2 things I did, is you practice this when everyone's calm. You don't go to this when everyone's upset and crying and screaming. I have something new for us to try. Never works. So you buy one of these and you practice it when you're calm, and you go ahead and you do it. Okay? And then when it's upset, you say, let's try the pinwheel. Here's the key. You want to know another key? I'm giving all my secrets away, Karen. You say to them this, let's do it together. So you make sure you have 2 pinwheels and you do it with the kid. If I say, here's the pinwheel, use it. Like I almost said to my kid right now, what have you said? Breathing bad, you out of control, forget it. If I say, let's do it together, I'm going to start. Ready? You sent a message, even with teenagers, by the way. I'm not sure I'd use this exactly with teenagers. I might use the other breathing. Let's breathe together. Let's breathe together. The other thing that you can do, and I'll show you one more, is you can get yourself one of these timers. Now, these are timer kind of things. But the nice thing about these things is you can just say, we're going to just sit. How long are we going to sit? We're going to sit until all of this is down here. I have a concrete way. Okay? It's the old lava lamp. First of all, the dropping of this is great, right? You can just see it kind of drop away. But it's a great thing. You want to get a teenager something, so just stick it on your desk. And just see that mesmerizing, again, I'm alone in the room right now, but mesmerizing kind of feeling. So being able to sit quietly for a minute and just look at something. If I say, just sit quietly, and I don't do something instead, what happens when mom says we're done? I'm really going to get it. Or B, why am I sitting quietly? I don't want to sit quietly. I have no idea to sit quietly. I still have homework to do, and I'm annoyed, and now I'm hungry, and my brother has just looked at me the wrong way. Okay, so now I've got a task. My task is this. So there's 2 things, and for the rest, you can reach out to me.
Yes, this has been so helpful, Michelle. I really am so delighted and thankful for you coming on this ChildNEXUS live event to share such valuable and important information that the parents can, employ right now to kind of get started. And I really want to encourage families to reach out to you. And I will share the information from this webinar right after, well, not immediately after, I have to upload the video, but by the end of the day today, all the attendees will have a replay of the video and documents that you provided and used during your presentation today. So thank you so much. It was very, very helpful.
Thank you.
And I've been really enlightened, and I'm going to purchase a pinwheel for my own kids. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Terrific. Guys, this was great. Thank you very much for including me. Have a wonderful day. Everybody breathe today. Yes. I'm going to breathe too. I'll follow what I said.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michelle.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.